If you're here with me right now, please take a moment to like this video, hit subscribe, and leave me a comment telling me where you're watching from. It means more than you know. I want to tell you something that happened to me not too long ago. Something I didn't talk about for a long time because I was ashamed. Not of what was done to me, but of how long it took me to see it. My name is Eleanor. I'm 67 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom house in Greensboro, North Carolina, the same house my husband Gerald and I bought 31 years ago when the neighborhood still had white picket fences and everybody knew everybody's name. Gerald passed 14 months ago. Colon cancer. It moved fast, and then he was gone, and I was standing in our kitchen on a Tuesday morning wondering how a person is supposed to make coffee for one. My daughter's name is Renee. She's 41. She works in insurance, or she used to. I'll get to that. She has her father's eyes and her grandmother's stubbornness. And for most of her life, we were close. Sunday phone calls. Birthday lunches at the Olive Garden on Battleground Avenue. She'd bring her boyfriend, a quiet man named Curtis who fixed air conditioners for a living and never had much to say but always helped me carry groceries in from the car. When Gerald died, Renee came down from Charlotte for the funeral and stayed 2 weeks. I was grateful. The house felt enormous without him, every room too quiet, every corner reminding me of something. Having her there helped. Then she went back to Charlotte, and I adjusted. Slowly, the way you do. About 3 months after Gerald passed, Renee called me on a Sunday evening. She said she'd been thinking and she was worried about me being alone. She said Curtis and she had talked and they wanted to move in with me for a little while. Just temporarily, just until I got back on my feet. I told her I appreciated that, but I was managing fine. I had my neighbor Phyllis next door, who brought me casseroles twice a week whether I wanted them or not. I had my church ladies. I had my routine. But Renee kept calling, every few days, asking if I was eating, asking if I was sleeping, asking if I'd remembered to pay the electric bill, as if I hadn't been paying it for 30 years on my own. The concern felt warm at first. Then it started to feel like something else. I couldn't name it yet, so I let it go. In January, she called and said Curtis had lost his job. She said things were tight in Charlotte. She said it would only be for a few months, and she would help around the house, and it made more sense than paying rent somewhere when I had a whole extra bedroom sitting empty. And I said yes. That was my first mistake, not because I shouldn't help my own daughter, but because I said yes when something in my chest was already whispering that this wasn't quite right. They moved in on a Saturday with 2 carloads of boxes and a U-Haul trailer, more stuff than I expected. I remember thinking, where are they planning to put all of this? But I didn't say anything. I helped Renee hang her curtains in the guest room, and I made a pot of vegetable soup, and that night things felt almost normal. The changes started small. So small, I almost missed them. The first thing I noticed was the mail. I've always gotten my mail myself, every morning before 9 o'clock, walked down the driveway in my robe if I had to. About 2 weeks after they moved in, I came outside one morning and Renee was already at the mailbox. She handed me a few envelopes, birthday card from my cousin in Memphis, a Kohl's flyer, and she went back inside. I didn't think anything of it. Until it happened again. And again. And then one morning I came down and she said, "I already got it, Mama. Nothing important." Nothing important. That's what she said. I'm not sure exactly when I stopped seeing my own bank statements. It crept up on me the way fog does. You don't notice until you're already inside it. Renee had offered to help me go paperless with my accounts, said it was easier, said she'd help me set everything up online. I thought that sounded reasonable. Gerald had always handled the paperwork side of things, and truth be told, I was still finding my footing. So I let her help me. I gave her my login information. Just to set it up, she said. Around March, I started having dizzy spells. Not severe. More like a floatiness when I stood up too fast. A kind of fog behind my eyes that I couldn't shake. I mentioned it to Renee and she said I was probably dehydrated and handed me a glass of water. When I mentioned it again a week later, she said she'd already called my doctor's office and explained that I'd been having some confusion and they'd adjusted one of my blood pressure medications. I had not been having confusion, but by that point I was so used to Renee speaking for me in small ways that I let that pass too. My doctor is a woman named Dr. Annette Tran. She's been my physician for 11 years. Calm, thorough, never makes you feel rushed. I've been seeing her every 3 months for my blood pressure and my cholesterol and the mild arthritis in my left knee, and for most of those appointments Renee had started coming into the exam room with me. I told myself it was because she cared. I told myself it was nice to have someone there. I want you to remember this part, because this is the part where I think about how long I looked at something and told myself it was fine. My appointment in April was a Tuesday morning. Renee drove me, she came in with me, sat in the chair beside the exam table, and when Dr. Tran asked me how I'd been feeling, Renee answered first. She said I'd been having some memory trouble. She said I'd left the stove on twice. She said I'd gotten confused about my medications. None of that was true, not in the way she was saying it. The stove thing had happened once, months ago, and it was because I'd been on the phone with my sister. Normal. The kind of thing anyone does. I tried to say something and Renee gently put her hand on my arm. Let me just explain it properly, Mama. As if I couldn't explain my own life. Doctor, Tran listened. She looked at Renee. Then she looked at me. And something in her face shifted just slightly. I can't tell you exactly what it was. A stillness, like she was paying very close attention to something Renee couldn't see. She asked Renee to step outside for a moment so she could do a physical examination. When the door closed, Dr. Tran sat down on her rolling stool and looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Eleanor, how are you really doing?" And something cracked open in me. Right there in that exam room, sitting in my paper gown on that cold table. I didn't cry, but my voice went very small. I said, "I'm not sure." She nodded. She asked me a few questions. Was I sleeping? Was I eating? Did I feel like I was in control of my own daily life? That last question sat in the room like something heavy. I told her about the mail, about the bank accounts, about my medication being changed without my knowledge. I watched her write something down and her jaw tightened, just barely, but I saw it. She stood up and said she was going to step out to bring Renee back in, and while she did, she needed me to look at something on the counter. There was a paper cup with a pen in it, and tucked behind the pen, folded once, was a small piece of paper. I took it. I unfolded it with my thumb while I could hear voices in the hallway. It said, "Do not leave with her today. Tell her you need to wait for blood work. Call your bank and your attorney before you go home. I'm concerned." I read it twice. My hands were completely still. I don't know why I wasn't shaking. Maybe because some part of me already knew. Maybe because that whispering in my chest from January had never fully gone quiet. I folded the note and put it in my bra. When Renee came back in, she looked at me and smiled and asked if everything was okay. I told her Dr. Tran wanted me to wait for some blood work results before leaving. Renee looked slightly annoyed, but she went back to the waiting room. I sat in that exam room alone for a few minutes. I could hear the hallway, the ordinary sounds of a doctor's office, phones, footsteps, a child somewhere nearby asking for a sticker. And I sat with the fact that my daughter had been lying to my physician about my mental state. I want you to understand what that feels like. You raised this person. You rocked her when she had earaches at 2 in the morning. You drove her to dance recitals and helped her with college applications and cried at her graduation and taught her how to make pie crust from scratch. And somewhere along the way, without you seeing it happen, she decided that your home and your savings and your life were something she could manage better than you could. Or take. I'm still not entirely sure which it was. A nurse I didn't recognize poked her head in and quietly handed me a phone. Dr. Tran asked me to give you some privacy, she said. I called my bank first, my checking account. I asked them to walk me through recent transactions. The woman on the phone had a kind voice. She read me the last 30 days of activity. There were 3 transfers I didn't recognize, each one moving money into an account I'd never heard of. The total was over $9,000. I asked her to put a temporary freeze on outgoing transfers. She asked me if I wanted to report it as unauthorized activity. I said yes. My voice was steadier than I expected. Then I called my attorney. His name is Roland. He handled Gerald's estate and we'd known each other through church for 20 years. I got his voicemail. I left a message that was probably not very coherent, but I said enough. I said, my daughter has access to my accounts. I said, I think something is wrong. I said, please call me back as soon as you can, please. I called my neighbor Phyllis last. I told her what Dr. Tran had written. I told her about the money. Phyllis has never been a dramatic woman. She's the kind of person who responds to emergencies by immediately making a plan. She said, I'm in my car right now. Tell me exactly which entrance to use. Phyllis picked me up from a side door of the building. I didn't go back through the waiting room. I didn't see Renee. I found out later she waited 45 minutes before asking the front desk where I was. Phyllis took me to her house. I sat at her kitchen table and drank tea. I didn't taste and we waited for Roland to call back. He called within the hour. He told me to stay exactly where I was, not to contact Renee, and he would begin the process of removing her from any accounts she had access to and reviewing the power of attorney documents she'd asked me to sign in February. I had signed documents in February. I'd thought they were related to Gerald's estate. Some remaining paperwork Roland had sent over. Renee had explained them to me while I was tired, and I had signed where she pointed. I want to stop here and say something directly to you if you're watching this and you're my age or anywhere close to it. If someone is explaining paperwork to you quickly, while you're tired, while they're standing over your shoulder, stop. Ask them to leave the room. Read every word yourself. Call your own attorney, not theirs, not the one they recommend. Your own. This is not about trusting or not trusting your family. This is about protecting yourself because the law will not always do it for you. Roland discovered that the documents Renee had me sign included a durable power of attorney that gave her broad authority over my financial accounts, broader than I had understood. She had already used it to set up a direct transfer arrangement with a credit union account in her name. She had also contacted 2 assisted living facilities in the Greater Charlotte area and requested information packets and pricing. I did not know any of this. The day I found out about the assisted living facilities, I sat in Phyllis's guest room for a long time without moving. Not because I was sad, or not only because I was sad. I was trying to understand how the same person who used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms could have researched where to put me so she could have my house. That's not the question I've fully answered yet. Maybe I never will. What happened next moved quickly, the way legal things sometimes do when the right people are involved. Roland sent a formal revocation of power of attorney to Renee by certified mail into the financial institutions. The unauthorized transfers were flagged, and the credit union froze the account pending investigation. Renee called me 4 times the day the letter arrived. I didn't answer. Curtis called once. I didn't answer that either. She came to Phyllis's house on a Thursday evening. She sat in Phyllis's living room and she cried. She said she had only been trying to help me. She said I wasn't capable of managing everything on my own anymore and someone had to do it. She said I was going to get confused and lose everything Gerald had worked for and she was only trying to protect me. I listened to all of it, and when she was finished I said, Renee, you moved $9,000 out of my account. You lied to my doctor. You researched assisted living facilities without telling me. None of that is protecting me. She didn't have an answer for that. I told her she and Curtis had 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. She started to say something and I said, "I'm not asking. I had a locksmith change every lock in my house before they moved out." Phyllis stayed with me the night they left. The financial investigation concluded 4 months later. The district attorney's office reviewed the case and determined there was sufficient evidence to charge Renee with financial exploitation of an elder, which in North Carolina is a felony. She pleaded to a lesser charge, a Class H felony for financial exploitation, and received a suspended sentence, probation, and was ordered to repay the $9,000 in full. She is not allowed to have any financial authority over me in any form. That is a condition of her probation. People ask me if we speak. We don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'm not close to it. I raised her and I love her the way only a mother loves a child, down in the place where love and grief sit right next to each other. And you can't always tell them apart. But love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be harmed. That's something I had to learn very late in life, and I wish I'd learned it sooner. Dr. Trang called me a few weeks after everything settled. She said she'd noticed a pattern over several appointments. The way Renee positioned herself between me and the exam room door, the way she answered before I could, the way my chart had been annotated with concerns that didn't match what she was observing in me. She said she had been building up to saying something for months, and that day in April something told her it was time. I told her that a folded note in a paper cup saved my life. Not dramatically. My life wasn't in physical danger as far as I know, but the life I was supposed to have, the independence, the house Gerald and I built, the right to make my own decisions until I am no longer on this earth. That note gave me that back. I still get my own mail every morning. I walk down the driveway in my robe if I have to, and I stand at the end of the driveway for a minute sometimes, looking at the neighborhood the way it is now, not the way it used to be. And I think about Gerald, and I think about how much I wished he were here. And then I walk back inside, and I make coffee, and I get on with my day. If you have a trusted doctor, tell them the truth, all of it. The things that feel too small to mention, the things you're embarrassed about. If something doesn't feel right at home, say so in the exam room, even in a whisper, even when someone is sitting right next to you. A good physician will hear what you're not saying. And if someone is helping you with paperwork, anyone, family or not, read every word before you sign anything. Every word. You have earned the right to your own life. Don't let anyone manage it out of your hands. Thank you for being here with me today. If this story stayed with you, please leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever felt something was wrong before you could prove it. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll see you next time. I've thought about this a lot since everything settled. What made it possible for things to go as far as they did? And I keep coming back to the same answer. It wasn't that I was weak. It wasn't that I was naive. It was that I kept giving the benefit of the doubt to someone who had already stopped deserving it, because I couldn't bring myself to believe that the person I raised would do what she was doing. That's not a character flaw. That's love. But love without clear eyes is how people get hurt. What Renee did had consequences she didn't plan for, and I think that matters to understand. Not because I want to feel satisfied about it. I don't, not really. But because the consequences weren't punishment that came from outside her. They came directly from the choices she made. She moved money she hadn't earned. She signed my name to arrangements I never agreed to. She told a physician things about me that weren't true. Each one of those decisions built on the last, and by the time she was sitting in Phyllis's living room crying, she had constructed a situation she could not talk her way out of. Because the records existed, the transfers existed, the documents existed. She did that, not me, not the court. Her. That's how it works. Not always quickly, not always neatly, but the things we build in secret don't stay secret. They accumulate. And eventually someone notices, a physician with good instincts, a neighbor who picks up the phone, an attorney who reads the fine print. The truth has a way of becoming visible whether we invite it to or not. What I want to say about myself is this. I am proud that I made the call to the bank. I am proud that I left through the side door. I am proud that when Renee sat across from me and cried and told me I wasn't capable, I looked at her calmly and told her exactly what she had done. That took something I had to build in real time, standing in a paper gown in a cold exam room with a folded note in my hand. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified. But I did it anyway. And that's the only kind of courage I've ever believed in. The kind that shows up when you're scared and does the thing regardless. I think the hardest wisdom I've had to sit with is that protecting yourself is not a betrayal of love. I spent too many months confusing those two things. I thought that questioning Renee meant I didn't trust her. I thought that standing up for myself meant I didn't love her. Neither of those things is true. You can love someone completely and still say, what you are doing to me is wrong and I will not allow it to continue. That's not coldness. That's self-respect. And self-respect is not something you lose the right to when you get older, when you grieve, when you're tired, when you need help. It stays yours. It is yours until the very end. If you're watching this and something in your life doesn't feel right, in your home, with your finances, with someone who keeps answering for you before you can speak, please don't wait as long as I did. Your discomfort is information. Your instincts are information. A whisper in your chest that says something is wrong is worth paying attention to, even when you can't prove it yet, even when it's someone you love. You have earned everything you have. Guard it and trust yourself.